How's it going, everybody? Today I got probably the biggest video I've made yet. This video took me hours and hours to make. It was super stressful, but I did have a lot of fun making it. And for this video, I'm going to be ranking every episode of the Boondocks from worst to best. At first, I was actually going to just rank every episode of SpongeBob from the first 3 seasons, but there are some episodes that I don't remember too well, and I would have to rewatch them. But Boondocks, I remember basically all the episodes, and Boondocks has quickly become one of my favorite shows of all time. It has great comedy, great action, and everything about it is just awesome. Before we get started, remember this is just my opinion. These are just my personal favorite episodes. The ones that I enjoyed the most and I think are worth watching and rewatching. I'm not some genius analyst that knows all the themes up behind the episodes or any of the hidden lessons or any of that. I wish I was that smart, but I'm not. But these are just the ones that I think are the best. Feel free to disagree in the comments. I know people are going to disagree if this video gets any views. But yeah, without further ado, let's just dive straight in. At dead last, we got the new black. And I don't think this is the worst episode, but it's still terrible just because it was the final episode of the series. Like, what a terrible way to end just an amazing legendary series. It's such a bad episode. It revolves around Riley making fun of like autistic people and calling them gay. And this episode just like there's a bunch of snowflakes in this episode. Like this episode basically predicted cancel culture before it was a thing. There was so many people on the news that were so offended by it, and I don't like this episode. Next up, we got Freedom Land, which is a terrible episode because, first of all, screw Ed the Second, man. This guy pisses me off. I don't like this guy. And if you guys watched my other Boondocks video, the first one I did, y'all already know how I feel about the fourth season. And this is definitely the worst episode of the worst season. This episode just revolves around the Freemans basically being slaves. They say they're supposed to act to be slaves, for other people's entertainment, but no, they're basically slaves and get treated terribly by this man Ed the Second, so that he could just make money off of them being slaves. But there was some pretty good fight scenes at the end, I won't lie, and it was super satisfying seeing Huey punch Ed the Second in the face. But yeah, this episode sucks. Granddad Dates a Kardashian is such a disgusting looking episode, but before that, I hate the plot of this episode. It just revolves around one of the quote unquote Kardashians injecting stuff into her ass, so it just gets bigger, and throughout the episode, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it just looks disgusting. And then there's this part whenever they're eating at a restaurant and then her ass just explodes and like disgusting shit comes out of it. And it's super gross. I'm not going to show it. But yeah, also that Kardashian is super annoying. I hate her. She's so annoying. Her sister was so annoying too. That guy that was there too. This is such a terrible episode. And I hate whenever Granddad was in the hospital crying for her. Like, are you serious? She just injected stuff into her ass, and now she's in the hospital, and then you feel bad for her? Like, nah, I don't like that. This episode sucks. Early Bird Special, I don't really have too much to say about this episode. It just sucks. There's nothing interesting about it. I hate those old ladies. They're super annoying, and the story of this one just sucks. I don't like this episode. I really wanted to like this episode, man, because I know it's a reference to Breaking Bad, which I heard is an incredible show, one of the best shows ever I've heard. But I still need to watch it. I'm definitely going to watch Breaking Bad one of these days. But anyway, this episode kind of sucked. And one of the main reasons I hate season 4 is because of their financial problems they have. I don't like that they're struggling financially. It's kind of dumb. And also, there's actually like a continuous plot in the season. Like before, all the seasons prior, it was just episodic episodes. Like every new episode, there's a new plot with that one. And I don't think a continuous plot works well for a show like Boondocks, which is obviously proved by this season's existence. But this episode just all around sucks. But the moment in the end, whenever Granddad's like in the middle of the street with his gun out and says, "I'm gonna go out like a G," is pretty dope. I won't lie. Granddad was a badass in that scene, but this episode's disappointing. So I kind of already explained myself on this one. This is where the whole plot of them being broke started and was pretty much the stepping stone to a disappointing season. Not much to say. I already explained it. Moving on. This episode has some funny bits, but I don't know, man. It's not my type of episode. It's just really weird. Like, there's just these big, jacked, oily dudes, shirtless, walking around and crap. I'm like, what? And then that dude with the pink shirt, I forgot his name. He was really weird, and I don't know. I felt uncomfortable watching this episode. It's not the worst, but I don't rock with this episode. This episode wasn't my favorite, but it wasn't all that bad. It was actually kind of interesting seeing Robert's backstory in the civil rights days. It was kind of interesting, and like his little team he had with that woman and that big, giant just tank dude. It was that dude was funny. I like it. He was just tanking everything, and he was like a nice, humble guy. Not the worst episode, but it's not that bad. Stink Meaner begun the Clone War has, in my opinion, is super disappointing just because it's a Stink Meaner episode and its counterparts are way, way better and they're way higher on this list. Y'all see later. But I don't know, man. This episode is it just doesn't hit the mark like the other ones do. The whole plot of Stink Meaner having clones isn't all that interesting. And I didn't like Granddad's like Stink Meaner phase he had for a bit at the end of the episode. He kind of felt like a badass whenever he was just beating the crap out of Stink Meaner in the boxing ring. But besides that, I didn't really like this episode. At first, I was expecting a lot from this episode, since it's another Thugnificent episode, and I'll get into why I like Thugnificent so much later on this list, but it kinda sucked watching this man Thugnificent struggle a lot. It's not that entertaining, it kinda sucks. And the plot of him, like, trying to revive his rap career, or keeping his rap career alive kinda sucks. And I also don't like that kid that was blowing up and taking over. He was super annoying, and there was this one part of the episode whenever one of Thugnificent's old like friends from his like rap crew had like actual good like job, and then Thugnificent like pretty much makes him lose it, and he kind of feels like a dick right there. But it's not the worst. Thugnificent is still obviously a hilarious character, and it's the only reason this episode is not that bad. So I've always been a big fan of movies or shows whenever an AI malfunctions and turns against humanity and goes rogue. I love that. I think that concept is so cool. But Siri, in my opinion, just really wasn't it for me. And the plot was kind of dumb in this episode. It doesn't make that much sense. Siri was pretty stupid. I was expecting a lot from this episode, but there was a couple funny moments like that scene whenever Granddad's buying the iPhone at the Apple store is hilarious, but this episode's not the best. There's not really much to say about this episode. It's just some annoying family members that stay over after Hurricane Katrina happens. That's basically it. Nothing exciting happens in this episode. It's not even that funny. I just don't like these family members. That's it. So I know that this episode has like a deep meaning behind it. People dealing with stress and talking about taking drugs to relieve that stress, and I know it's supposed to reach out to those people that are dealing with the same problems as Granddad is in this episode. He's stressed, he's old or whatever, so he takes drugs to relieve the stress and whatnot, and then he just starts losing his mind. But I don't know, it's just Granddad doesn't feel like the type that would do that crap. But I know I see what the message was behind this episode, but it's not the best. This episode's pretty boring. I'm not a big fan of these like love episodes or whatever. It had some funny moments, but I don't like this episode. Alright, from here on, I think these are the episodes that I would consider actually like solid. And first off, we got the story of Lando Freeman. I'm not gonna lie, this is probably one of the most forgettable episodes in the show. Like, I completely forgot it existed, but it's not too bad. Lando was actually a pretty cool character. He's dope. And the story was actually interesting. Like, what? Granddad has another son and he's right here. And then, it's pretty cool seeing him hang out and get along. And then later, like, Granddad doesn't want to be with him no more. And then, like, it's a really interesting episode. It's pretty cool. It's not that funny. It's not the funniest episode, but the plot twist at the end was actually not that bad. Not a terrible episode. Now, some of y'all might be surprised that I have this episode so low, but it was definitely a funny episode, don't get me wrong, but it was kind of disturbing when that, like, model got all fat and ugly, and I'm not body shaming because these people are just animated characters and not real, but anyway, I just gotta make sure I don't get canceled, you know what I mean? This episode is kind of disgusting too, like, all these random people just having heart attacks on beds and crap, and they don't even care. I don't know, it's just, the food looks ugly as heck too, and Granddad just kind of seems like a dick in this episode. It was really weird and disturbing, I don't know. As much as we all love Ruckus, we already know he's one of the funniest characters in the show, maybe the funniest, but I feel like him playing the main character for some episodes doesn't really work. And like I said, some, not all of them. This one doesn't really work for me. I do like the fact though that there's this guy that Ruckus admires so much, but the guy himself, Jimmy Rebel, is not the most likable character out there. I didn't really like him. Don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of funny scenes in this episode, but it's not my favorite. It's not a bad episode at all, but it's not the best. Screw this kid. I hate this kid. Rest of the episode is fine though. This is, in my opinion, another really forgettable episode, but it's enjoyable. Like, I like how they basically fool everybody. That's their like granddad is like that he's blind, and there's a bunch of funny moments. This episode's pretty funny. It's not the best, but it's definitely a fun episode. Riley Was Here is a pretty enjoyable episode. Uh, I like the plot about Riley learning how to draw and crap. It's a really fun episode, and of course we get to see Bob freaking Ross in this episode. Man, that's so cool. That's awesome. And Bob Ross is a pretty chill dude in this episode. He's just cool. Like he's just such a nice dude in this episode, of course. But in the end, whenever he's running from the cops and he pulls out his gun, it's so funny. It's awesome. Great episode. This episode has a lot of funny moments, but as a whole, it's a nice, solid little episode about this legend known as Catcher Freeman, and the story of Catcher is actually pretty interesting and entertaining. I liked it. I liked all the characters that were in Catcher's story. It was a great story, and I also found it cool that there's different versions of the story, like real life legends, and each version of the story is funny and interesting in its own way. And yeah, just a really solid episode. The Block is Hot is a fun, nice little episode. It has a simple plot to it, an enjoyable plot, but goddamn, is Wunxler a piece of shit in this episode. He is using a nice, innocent little girl, Jasmine. She's just trying to sell her lemonades while it's super hot outside, to try to make some money to buy herself a nice little doll or something. But here, Wunxler just comes in and uses her to make money. Like, what a piece of shit! I know he's funny and all, but like he was a real dick in this episode. But it's still a pretty good episode. Ruckus, like I said, is the GOAT. And in this episode, he's hilarious because we finally get to see, the daily life of Ruckus and his 32 jobs. And he just constantly keeps on making me laugh this episode. His jokes are hilarious. But I'm not gonna lie, man, I hated those BET people. They were super annoying, especially that one woman. I hated her. But they didn't bring this episode down. It's still a great, goated Ruckus episode. I'm pretty sure even if you're not a Boondocks fan or you've never even watched, or even if you don't know what Boondocks is, you've probably seen the infamous clip that's in this video. I mean, in this episode, you've probably seen it in like a couple of memes before. But yeah, this episode's pretty good. I won't lie. I don't like Rolo Goodman or whatever his name is. Good Love. I don't care what his name is. I don't like that dude. He's annoying. I hate like the news. Like the news are just super annoying sometimes in this episode. And then there's this one girl, of course. I hated her. She was super annoying. But besides that, this episode's pretty freaking good. It's great. It's really funny. I actually made a bit of a mistake here because I completely forgot about this episode's existence because what I first did was just did my list and then I did from number 55 to number 33. I did scripts for those, I recorded those and edited those. But then when I was doing the scripts for, from number 34 to 20, I realized that I had an episode in there twice. On number 31, I had an episode that I already had before that. So I'm like, oh, what the heck? What is this? I had an episode on there twice, so I forgot an episode, and it was this one. So I just had to put it in here, like, as number 31. But really, I would have it in, like, the 40s or something, because I don't like this episode. Another, like I said, Rolo Goodlove, whatever his name is. I don't like that dude, but yeah. I made a mistake, guys. I'm sorry. Yeah, moving on. This is another just entertaining episode about a great time of the year, that being Christmas, of course. And we see Huey trying to set up a play for the school about Christmas, and it's great. It's awesome. It's funny. This episode just has some really nice vibes to it. There's snow. It's a great looking episode. And my favorite part of this episode would definitely have to be Riley's like story with Santa. Him just constantly trying to beat up Santa over and over again. It's funny. It's a funny concept. And then he even starts shooting him at one point. It's great. It's an awesome episode. This episode is great, man. I wish I could have put it a little bit higher in this list, but I just like the ones above this one way better. But yeah, anyway, this episode is hilarious. My favorite part of this episode would definitely have to be all the interviews, and the best one, of course, is Riley's interview. Thugnificent was pretty good too, but they're both hilarious. And then Thugnificent's song that he made about Obama was way too funny. And then Thugnificent just pretending like all of a sudden to be a super Obama supporter. It's funny as hell. It's such a great, enjoyable episode. And I also love the running gag of Tom in this episode just being an off-brand Obama. That's awesome. Pretty Boy Flizzy is like one of the only good episodes of season 4, and for a pretty good reason. Pretty Boy Flizzy, of course, being Chris Brown, and Tom is the main character for this one. You already know all the Tom episodes are great, they're good. But yeah, seeing Chris Brown help Tom with his relationship with his wife is great. When they're together, they're a pretty good duo, like together, since Chris Brown is like a piece of shit. He abuses women, and then Tom doesn't believe in that. He's a nice guy or whatever. That's a pretty good dynamic. And this episode too, it kind of just makes you feel bad for our boy Tom, like the most innocent dude out there. But yeah, it's a great episode, and I won't lie, man. I don't know why it's so funny whenever Tom curses. I think it's because he never curses and he doesn't like when people curse or any of that. It sounds so funny when he cusses.
Come on, motherfucker!
What a funny name for an episode, but Luna is a great freaking character. She's funny, the way she talks super fast is awesome, and then she just gets really angry and crazy all of a sudden as the title says. Like it's super funny. Like she's just talking normal and then she goes insane and goes back to normal. And then she just beats the crap out of all the guys in this episode. She's literally a crazy bitch. But yeah, it's a really enjoyable episode. The ending to this episode was pretty freaking dark, I won't lie. And that Mortal Kombat reference was pretty cool.
Flawless victory.
First of all, let's talk about the beginning part of this episode, which is, of course, the Chris Hansen reference. And this scene was hilarious. It was awesome. It was so funny. I did not expect to watch Boondocks and see Chris Hansen well, if you've seen the episode, you know what happens to him. I don't know if I can say this on YouTube, but it's funny. It's an awesome scene. But the rest of the episode is hilarious. It's about Huey and Riley being bad, so then they get sent to prison, so then they could see how bad it really is, and then they could probably act better afterwards and learn the lesson. But Tom decides to tag along in this one because you already know what his fear is. So he goes to the place to try to confront his fear, and confronts his fear. He does. Biggest fear is happening literally right in front of his eyes. It's funny. He's panicking and crap, but then he finally confronts the fear and takes it over. He overcomes his biggest fear, and it's awesome. It's great. It's funny. And also the other criminals trying to escape the prison is pretty hilarious too. Amazing episode. This episode is pretty funny because Gangstalicious in this one makes like a hit song, which is, well, gay, but his fans don't realize it and still support him because, he's the cool rapper or whatever. He's what's poppin'. And then he makes like these gay clothes and everybody starts wearing them because, that's their favorite rapper. It must be cool, right? And then, of course, Riley, being a big fan of Gangstalicious, starts wearing his clothes thinking that they're cool, but it's gay. And then you see Granddad freaking out because he thinks Riley's like gay, and it's hilarious. He's like, "No, Ruckus, I have a gay grandson," and he's like, "Well, that must fucking suck," and it's funny. And then, of course, the truth is revealed to all of Gangstalicious fans, and they don't want to be fans of him anymore because he's gay, and they're like, "Wow, this guy's gay. I don't want to be a supporter of him no more." And then even Thugnificent, he was supposed to do a collab song with Gangstalicious, but then he finds out the truth, and he doesn't want to do the collab song no more. And it's funny, that scene where him and his crew are trying to hide from Gangstalicious when he's outside to record is funny. It's hilarious. Great episode. This episode legit makes me feel bad for Ruckus. Like one of the biggest pieces of shit in the show. He's always saying bad stuff to the main characters and all that. But in this episode, we learn his backstory and we learn that his, father was abusive. And I won't lie, when Ruckus is having fun playing with his toys or whatever he's doing, and then his dad Mister comes in, he's like, "Did I just catch you having fun?" And then just slaps the soul out of Ruckus. He goes flying. It's sad, but at the same time, it's funny. I don't know why. We also see Ruckus' whole family. We see that he has some brothers, and those brothers are actually, pretty chill dudes. They're cool, they're awesome. And then yeah, it's a great, amazing episode centered around Ruckus, and also how the hell is his grandma still alive? How are his parents still alive? That doesn't make any sense. But who cares? This episode's great. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this in another video before, but basketball is my favorite sport. I love watching and playing basketball, so I already knew I was gonna like this episode, and it's super funny. It's about Riley learning how to play basketball because, well, he sucks at basketball. In the beginning of the episode, he's all, he with his high ego and stuff. He thinks he's really good because, well, the only thing he can do is dribble, and he thinks that's good, but no, he can only dribble. That's it. He can't do nothing else. Pass, shoot. He doesn't know how to do anything else, so he has to learn how to play the game, how to work with his teammates, and it's great. It's awesome. And then some of like the action shots whenever they're playing basketball is funny. Like dudes are legit just getting dropped, and then it makes like a super loud sound, like if they were dropped from like a building or something. And it's funny. It's just hilarious and very enjoyable episode. This episode right here focuses on Tom's relationship with his wife Sarah, and is in this episode they're having problems with their relationship. And Tom, he's like depressed, he's down, he's crying. He even gets kicked out of his own house. Like, damn, that's got to fucking suck. So then he has to stay over with the Freemans, but granddad being granddad doesn't want Tom to stay there anymore. And so then he ends up hiring a pimp named Slickback. This dude is amazing. I love a pimp named Slickback. He's so funny. He's awesome. He's great. But yeah, a pimp named Slickback helps Tom, and it's hilarious. Great episode. This is the first Story of Gangstalicious episode. It's really funny. I like the chase in the hospital. It was intense. It was great, amazing, funny. And I don't really got much to say about this episode. It's great, but that ending was it was a little bit suspicious. The fundraiser is about Riley being mad that when the school makes him do a fundraiser, the money, well, it goes to the school, and Riley doesn't like that. He wants to keep the money that he makes for himself, so he starts his own fundraiser with other chocolate, and he tricks Jasmine and like a whole bunch of other people that it's for a good cause, that he's doing this fundraiser for like the animals or whatever, just good causes, but of course he's lying, and this leads to big ass problems with some chocolate companies and crap, and it's a really entertaining episode. And that scene, of course, at the end when Riley's just flaming the crap out of that company owner is legendary. Great episode. Thank You for Not Snitching is a pretty good episode, mainly because of Ed and Rummy, and I'll get into why they're amazing characters later on this list. But in this one, they're awesome as well. Their conversation they're having in the beginning of the episode about Bluetooth headsets, or throughout the whole episode about the Bluetooth headsets, is just way too funny. It's like one of the funniest moments in the show, if I'm being honest. Literally one of the funniest. And the episode just revolves around, them stealing, like breaking into houses and stealing them, and then the Woodcrest town has to try to figure out who was breaking inside people's houses at night and robbing them, even though Riley this whole time knew who it was. It was, of course, Ed and Rummy breaking in. He didn't want to snitch. He didn't want to tell anybody because those are his homies. But yeah, amazing episode. This episode is hilarious for one major reason, and that reason being Ed and Rummy. They might actually be the best duo on the show, if I'm being honest. And them on their own is pretty hilarious as well, but when they're together, they're on a whole completely new level of funny. Just the conversations they have are so like natural and normal and hilarious, and this is the first episode where they show up together, and just them when they're talking, man, it's super funny. And I like the fact that there's a dude named the Xbox Killer. I think that's pretty funny. And then that scene when they're at the gas station at the end is pretty funny too. Like it literally feels like some like GTA crap going on. And also Tom's side story in this episode is To say the least, funny, I guess, but it's a great episode. In this episode, Thugnificent and his crew show up, so you already know it's gonna be a great, funny episode. And of course, like I said, Thugnificent, hell of a funny character, amazing, like always. But the focus of this episode is that Riley is trying to join Thugnificent's gang, the crew thing, lethal interjection, so that he can get himself a nice icy chain, because that's what the lethal interjection has. A icy chain, and it's awesome at first seeing him doing all this stuff, getting girls online to come over, and then he has to get his approval first so he could join the lethal interjections. And it's funny, it's hilarious, but of course, at the end, or towards the middle of the episode, some bully jacks his chain, and then he gets all worried and panicking, and he has to get his chain back, and it's all around amazing, enjoyable episode. It's funny, him trying to get his chain back. Great episode. The Garden Party is an amazing, great first episode. It's the first episode of the series. It's an amazing introduction to the main characters. We even get to see Ruckus show up. We see Ed Wunxler. We see Ed the Third, which, by the way, Ed the Third probably had the funniest character introduction in the whole series. That moment is funny. Like, it's so freaking funny. But yeah, it's great. In this episode, we get to see what type of people each of the main characters are. We get to see how Riley is. We get to see what type of person Huey is. And of course, Granddad. Just all around amazing first episode to start off a great series. Number 15, or Die Trying. This episode has a really simple and great plot. It just revolves around Granddad being cheap in the movies. At first he brings outside food to the theaters, which of course isn't allowed in the real theaters, but we still bring them in anyway. You already know. You bring like some candy in your pocket or whatever. But then he sneaks into the theater without buying any tickets, and the excuses that Granddad makes to keep Jasmine like from getting all worried is funny. He's like, "No, I ordered my tickets online. It's fine." It's so funny. But she still, of course, ends up getting worried because she's breaking the rules. She's a good kid or whatever. And then the commercials, the ads before the movie starts, is talking about how people steal movies and how they're fucking jackasses, and stuntmen risk their lives every day to shoot these films for people to enjoy them, and then people are out here stealing them. Like, come on. And that, of course, freaks Jasmine out. She feels more guilty, and it's super funny. And then, of course, how can I forget about the Huey and Ruckus showdown that they have at the end of the episode? It's great, it's awesome, it's funny, and then it's pretty cool how it's a parallel to what's happening in the movie that they're watching. But yeah, just great, amazing, simple episode. This episode is just a super, really enjoyable, funny one that has to do with Granddad, getting played by this female that's just using it for his money. She's a gold digger. But, like, out of everything, this episode features a pimp named Slickback, which is such a hilarious character, man. He's so funny. Like, he's just so awesome. And I don't know, I love this guy. This guy's awesome. This guy's so funny. He makes if this episode didn't have a pimp named Slickback, I think it would be like somewhere around 20. But just a pimp named Slickback showing up for those few minutes was just made it super enjoyable. But the rest of the episode, like on its own, is really funny as well. And when they're at the mall, it plays Gold Digger. Great episode. This is another super enjoyable episode. One of the funniest in the show, if I'm being honest. One of the funniest. It almost made the top 10, but the ones above this are just better in my opinion. But anyway, this episode is about Granddad going on a vacation and leaving the kids home alone. Because in the beginning of the episode, there's a part when Huey talks about how no one can babysit them while Granddad tries to leave, and nobody really wants to babysit them. They're all scared of him and crap, and nobody can babysit them. So that just leads to them staying home alone. Well, actually, no. First, Ruckus has to babysit them, but they just end up like shooting him with a BB gun, and he just dips. And then after that, it's just like a war between Huey and Riley for like the rest of the episode. Riley's trying to escape, and Huey's he's gonna have to keep a watch over him. It's great. Like, it's literally a war between them. And they also have to figure out how to survive until Granddad comes back, since Riley wasted all the money to get himself some drip. And the airport scene with Granddad, it's awesome. But this is just an incredible episode. Amazing. Just enjoyable, funny episode. The first of the Stink Meaner trilogy, not counting the fourth one, of course. This is the first one, and it's a pretty good one to start off with because, first of all, Stink Meaner is just one of the funniest side characters in the show. This dude just talks trash for no reason. He lives to be a piece of shit. And then, when Granddad was training with Huey and Ruckus, it's hilarious. It's awesome, man. It's just, this dude, Stink Meaner is like a menace, man. This dude's so funny. And then the fight they have at the end, of course, is hilarious. Like, this man just dies. And it's just a great episode, a classic. Let's Snap Oprah. This episode is amazing because, like I previously said, this episode features Ed and Rummy. They're a duo, and then just them wanting to catch Oprah. It's just a funny concept. Like it's dumb, but it makes a lot of sense. It's funny, and then Riley tagging along with them made it like 10 times better. And then of course, since Riley tagged along with them, that means Huey would have to get involved, and then he's pretty much on like a mission to like stop him from catching Oprah, and it's funny as hell. And then of course, Huey pulls out his Nintendo Power Glove and then he has a great fight with Machito Brown. It's really enjoyable episode. Great jokes, awesome, and the ending is hilarious. Now we're finally down to the top 10, the last stretch, and this episode right here is incredible. It's a masterpiece. It revolves around Ruckus going around telling people to love the white people, and he's just trying to spread the message so that he could go to white heaven, as it's called. I know it sounds silly, but the main reason I love this episode so much is because of Huey and him trying to break his wrongfully accused friend Shabazz from his execution, and then Huey, makes up a plan to break him free, like some real badass prison break shit. But in the end, his plan is ruined because Granddad can't take him to the prison because he has to go help Ruckus and stop him from like just losing his mind. So then Huey just walks over to like the mountain and then he's super sad. He starts crying. And I forgot to mention this in the beginning of the episode. He says that he doesn't believe in praying. He's never prayed. He doesn't believe that that's true. And then Jasmine and Granddad in the episode tell him to just pray for his friend and then he'll be fine. But he doesn't believe in that. But when he's at the mountain crying and it looks like all hope is lost, he prays for the first time. And a few seconds before Shazam's supposed execution happens, Huey starts saying some real deep shit about how messed up the world we live in is and how just corrupted everything is. He says, this can't be how the world is supposed to be. It hits super deep. It's so incredible. And then a really good, beautiful song is playing in the background of all of this. And it's just so deep. And then right as his friend is supposed to be executed, they pull the switch, he's saved, and he ends up living and everything works out fine. It's just a beautiful episode, a masterpiece. This episode is just so freaking intense. It actually feels like the world is about to end. And of course, it's hilarious whenever a bunch of random people too, just start staying over at the Freeman's house whenever the original plan to survive was just 4 of them. But I don't know, this episode is just really tense. It feels insane, like a movie or something. And whenever Tom gets the virus, like, oh my god, from there on is like insane. Maybe I'm just a fan of apocalyptic scenarios, but this episode is just really enjoyable. It's insane. It'll have you on the edge of your seat. Of course, it's funny, it's hilarious. And my second favorite moment in the series is in this episode, and you'll find out what my first is later on. But this is whenever the Freemans are getting chased by the bus of like all those people from Woodcrest and Ruckus. And then you just slowly in the background just barely hear Thugnificent's music playing in the back. And then boom, he just comes in and crashes into the bus looking like a badass. And then he saves the Freeman so they just keep on driving. That moment is so good. And yeah, amazing episode. The story of Thugnificent is probably the funniest episode on the show. Maybe the one above this might take that spot, but I don't know. It's definitely one of the funniest in the show. Because first of all, Thugnificent is an incredible character. He's hilarious. He might be the funniest in the show, up there with like Ruckus. Like he's a rapper, he's rich, and then his little team he has is hilarious. One of them is voiced by Snoop Dogg. It's cool, man. He's just a cool ass dude. And then the back and forth between him and Granddad in this episode are too funny when they're just diss tracking each other. Like that diss track is so funny. But just Thugnificent being a funny ass character alone carries this episode to the top 10. Those diss tracks were funny. It's just a great all around enjoyable episode. This episode right here is, well, the trial of R. Kelly, as the title says, and it's just a super enjoyable, funny episode that anybody can just watch and tune into. It's great. It's such a simple, funny episode. Maybe the funniest in the show. It's definitely a contender for sure, but it's a great, all around enjoyable, funny episode. This episode right here is amazing. So this is basically a what if hypothetical if Martin Luther King was still alive, since in this episode he's clearly still alive, but instead of getting taken out, he was in a coma in this episode, and when he wakes up from that coma, he receives a lot of backlash from the general public. People don't like him. They don't like Martin Luther King, but this episode was great. We got to see Martin Luther King just, casually just hanging out with the Freemans and getting advice from Huey. That was pretty nice. But yeah, all around, great, amazing episode. Next up, we got Smoking with Cigarettes, and this kid, Lamelton, is a savage. Like, this dude was really out here. He was like 6 years old, stealing his grandma's car and then driving around like it was GTA or something. But yeah, he's super funny. Riley is the main character of this episode, and he's hilarious. Riley, of course, made me laugh so much in this episode. Almost every time he talked, I freaking laughed. And then him and Lamelton had that fight at the rooftop of the school, and that fight was actually pretty freaking good. As hand-to-hand combat, it was great, awesome. And then this dude, Melton, literally fell from a two-story like building, or I think it might have even been three, and like he just fell from it and he got up like it was nothing. He wasn't even hurt that much. This dude lived through that, and I found that super funny. I don't know why, but yeah, this episode is all around great. Granddad freaking out about Milton is great. Yeah, all around just amazing, incredible episode. This episode right here is obviously a hilarious episode. Of course, it's a stink meter episode, and the Hatriocracy themselves are awesome. They're great. But the reason it's number 4 and super high on this list is because of its fight scenes. The fight scenes in this episode are so freaking good. They're legit better than some anime, if I'm being honest. Some anime that I've watched. This is much better. It's just such good hand-to-hand combat. Like, it's great. And then at one point, this man, Bushido Brown, was 3v1ing the fight, and it looked great. And of course, the individual fights between the Freemans versus each member of the Hatriocracy was amazing. It was great. It was funny, and it's just such a rewatchable, incredible episode. I don't know, maybe I'm just a big fan of hand-to-hand combat. I prefer hand-to-hand combat over just big blast getting thrown around and explosions. I mean, those fights are incredible in their own way, but me, I've always just personally just liked hand-to-hand combat. But yeah, that's probably why I like this episode so much. This episode should have honestly been the finale, if I'm being honest, because this episode is incredible. It's holy hell, it's so freaking good. First of all, this episode features Ed and Rummy. Yeah, I know how I feel about Ed and Rummy. Best duo on the show. Their conversations that they have about iPhones in this freaking episode is hilarious, and this episode is just all around intense. It feels like a action movie because there's so much incredible action in this episode. Huey is a freaking badass. He's a goat in this episode. Like that bus sequence, oh my god, with Ruckus was way too freaking good. This should have been the last freaking episode. This episode was so magnificent. Number 2, Stink Meaner. This is the best Stink Meaner of the Stink Meaner episodes because they just don't freaking miss. But this episode starts off with Stink Meaner training in hell so he can come back to life, and he even freaking sees the devil and crap, and it's insane. And I love the fact this is probably the best part of the episode, that they decide to make Stink Meaner take over Tom's body, which is like super ironic since Tom is the nicest, most polite, honest guy on the show, and Stink Meaner is like the complete opposite. He is like literally the polar opposite of Tom. And then of course there's the fight, the legendary fight between the Freemans and Stink Meaner, the 3v1. It's so enjoyable to watch. It's awesome. And then of course Rockets comes in clutch with his ritual so we can take the soul away from Tom's body, and it's just so funny. The bed is literally floating and then they're just smacking the crap out of him. But then we learn an important lesson at the end of the episode: to resolve conflicts with peace. Number 1, the best episode in the series, in my opinion, I think that it is Red Ball. because first of all, a lot of characters show up in this one. We of course get Ed the Third and his grandpa Tom, the community service old lady, I don't know her name. Cindy shows up, Ruckus, even Rummy shows up to take out the ref, and it was just such an incredible episode seeing all these characters together on the same team, and the actual kickball game itself is freaking amazing. It's so freaking good. I know people out here talking about the Hunter x Hunter dodgeball game and how that one was so good. Nah, 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 screw that. This Boondocks kickball game is way better than that. And then of course Huey, he's such a freaking badass in this episode, man. Whenever he starts charging up the ball and then he kicks it, it's so fire. There's like red aura around him. It looks so freaking cool. And then there's my favorite moment in the whole show, my favorite in the entire series, and that is when the Asian team is talking crap about Huey, but in their own language, they're saying, "Oh, look at that! You know, he sucks or whatever. He's so dumb," in their own language. So they're like, "Man, this big Afro kid, he won't understand this, whatever." And then Huey just starts talking their language. He literally just starts talking in their language and tells them shit. And then he's such a badass. He kicks the crap out of them. They start bleeding, and it's an amazing moment. Alright, so that's gonna be it for this one. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. And yeah, I'm just trying to do just different types of videos on my channel. I don't want to just stick to one thing. I want to do everything. I just want to be a channel that does basically everything. So this video was pretty different from what I've done before. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, take care and see y'all next time.